We think it's degrading when people with real-life experiences that play active harms in their lives, when these experiences are emulated by people with a level of privilege, people who don't understand the circumstances, who want to emulate this experience for fun, for challenges, for the thrill of it. We think that this is inherently harmful to them and their struggles, which I'll be proving throughout my case. Before I begin, I'd like to start with some context. So we look at the nature of participants. So we think that they feel sorry for those who are struggling, so they donate money to charities, or they participate in these events because they think it is fun, or they are overall intrigued by it. We then look at the nature of charities, and we think that they try to raise money for the struggling and solve the problem that's causing them to struggle. We look at the people that they're raising money for, and they usually live in very harsh and stressful conditions and are very vulnerable in society. They also have more struggles than apart from the struggles that they're going through, such as their living conditions and situations like that. We think that emulated events try to make these circumstances that people are going through seem like a challenge or seem like people just doing it for the thrill of it. We look at the definition of a charity, and we think it's an organization that aims to raise money for those who are vulnerable in society. We think that emulate means to imitate the struggles, and the nature of experiencing these events is a one-time thrill, often people experiencing them once and are done with it. They don't go back again. So now, before I start with my matter, I'd like to give the case split for today. I, as your first speaker, will be talking about firstly education, and my second point is about stigma. My second speaker will be talking about distracting from the cause and the misuse of privilege, and my third speaker is Yufei. So now on to my first point about education. So we think that education isn't achieved through experiencing someone else's experience with a false view, because you don't actually understand. We think that these circumstances can only be understood by those actually living in that experience. We think that even if you do emulate this isn't good enough, because firstly, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. These participants have a safety blanket to fall back on when this experience is over. Whereas this is someone's real life, they don't have another option. We give you examples of hunger strikes, where the people in privilege do this. They can go home and eat a pizza, whereas someone who's living this real life cannot simply do that. We then looked at this isn't an accurate representation of what is happening, and this is important in our debate as I go into the second analysis on this, about how our side actually helps those people living in these vulnerable circumstances. So what we do is we create more education around the issue, so we provide more accurate reports by those actually affected. We give you examples of the March for Our Life protest. People who were actually affected by gun violence spoke in the protest, gave an accurate representation of what happened. We think that education is more valuable because firstly, it actually raises awareness for those who are in these circumstances. What this does is provide more accurate representation, which is more useful and creates more helpful discussions based on these issues in society. These discussions are important and helpful because they can create actual discourse within society. We think this discourse can help to deal with these issues, can help to deal with the overall experiences of these people, and we think this is incredibly helpful. We give you example of hospice vets who raised awareness for those living in the hospice, and examples such as Life Isidimeni, where education was actually brought up about the issues that these people faced, and we think this education overall is incredibly valuable because more awareness is made. We think that thirdly, more long-term effects of education are beneficial because they help to remove the stigmas, which my second point I'll flag you when I get there, and it can bring in more donors. We think that education can impact more people, which makes a higher chance of donation. We give you example of HIV/AIDS charities. We think the education around HIVs and the influence of this in society has brought more donors. We give you example of Live Aid and how Freddie Mercury did this when he was affected by HIV/AIDS. We think that more so, we think there's more help on people, there's more influence and more like importance placed on these people and how they can be helped. Because when education is brought up, the education around their struggles are also brought up, meaning that more can be done to help them stop with the circumstances that they're living in. We think that therefore, in conclusion, that point has proved to you that education is more beneficial and creates more long-term change, which is beneficial to these people. But now on to my second point about stigma. We think that because these privileged people who have safety blankets, who participate in these events, are emulating these experiences without fully understanding it, they're not actually living that experience. We think that they help to reinforce stigmas, that these circumstances aren't that difficult, that these circumstances aren't really detrimental. We think this undermines the issues of these vulnerable people. It degrades their experience and invalidates their struggles. When you invalidate someone's struggles, what you do is say that them and their issues aren't important, and we think that this this directly goes against what a charity aims to do, and we think that this directly goes against people that you're trying to help. We think that just overall, that stigmas about these people's issues are reinforced through these false experiences. This invalidates the people's struggles and harms them and harms efforts trying to help them. We don't really understand how there would be any buy-in for charities to opt into this, especially with what I've proved to you, because this goes against what charities aim to do. When you distract from the cause and you distract from education around it, you don't help charities in achieving their goal of dealing with these issues. We think that challenges based around these issues, such as ASL and the Ice Bucket Challenge, distract from what the actual cause was. We think that when the ASL challenge became such a mainstream ideal, it wasn't about people who have ALS, or it mainly became about celebrities doing this trend for publicity. We think that this is inherently harmful because you aren't helping those who actually need help. We think side proposition has proved two very important things to you just alone in our first speech. The first one being about how education is the only real mechanism to create change in society and to actively help people living in these circumstances. We think that education is the most important mechanism, and we think that side opposition directly needs to engage this. The second most important thing that we prove to you is how stigmas are reinforced under their side, and they don't help get rid of these stigmas which directly harm these people. We think that overall, side proposition needs to win today's debate, because not only do we help to benefit these people actually living in these circumstances, we help just their general living conditions through creating discourse, through creating things in society that actually benefit them. We think that you need to stand with side proposition in today's debate if you actually care about those who are vulnerable in society, if you actually care about those living in these circumstances. We think that side proposition is the only one you can vote for in today's debate. Thank you.
Stop. Okay. We see massive issues within society today: unemployment, disenfranchisement, poverty, and disease. And we, as opposition, see charities serve as a perfect entity and vessel to help fix these issues and help protect the most vulnerable actors within this debate. But more importantly, we feel as though by raising awareness and creating empathy to the most vulnerable groups in this debate and creating empathy to the issues which are most important into this debate, we deliver the most benefit for vulnerable groups within debate, and we allow charities to most successfully achieve their mandate within society. Therefore, we have never been more proud to propose. We accept to oppose. We accept side proposition's definition. Now, but we clash on the grounds that the idea opposed in the motion will in fact help impoverished people the most in the debate and help charities achieve their mandate within society, and therefore help fix society's problems overall and help society overall. Now let me move on to my rebuttal. So we see this idea given on side proposition that people within this debate and the people participating within these challenges are emulating them for fun, and they're doing them because they're challenging and interesting, etc. But we feel like they come in with this notion, the people participating come in with the notion that these ideas and issues are very serious. We don't feel like they're only doing it for the fun or challenge of the debate, obviously, or of the idea. Obviously, the main reason they're doing it is to help fix the issues. And we also feel like charities, as well as the people participating, are naturally good entities who want to help fix the problems that we're identifying in this debate and want to help the most vulnerable communities. And therefore, we see that this point falls. They've also said, under their education point, that charities should rather try to educate people about the issues that are deep in this debate, and that the idea that emulating the issues will not actually properly educate these people. First of all, we see that emulating the issues, we don't need to fully get people right into the emotional state of these people. We just need to have a basic grasp of the emotional issues that they're going through. And secondly, we see that the idea of education is not mutually exclusive. You can run this as a separate point to our point. They can both be run in the same world, and there are not separate ideas that are mutually exclusive to one another. And so we see this point falls in the debate too. Now onto my case split. So I'm going to be covering some context and characterization and recontextualization within this debate, and then my main point, which will be empathy. And my second speaker will be covering representation. So Now I'll move on to my positive matter. So context and characterization. So let's first of all see who's the most important actors in this debate. And we see this as charities. Now, the important thing about charities, and we've even seen side proposition admit to this, is that their goal is to help the vulnerable actors in this debate. Their goal is to help fix the issues that the vulnerable actors deal with. And we see that their mandate, how they started out as companies, is to help fix the issues that these people are dealing with and help them to protect them from the issues within society that they deal with. And therefore, we see that a very important way to win in this debate is for either prop or op to identify how charities can best achieve this mandate. All right. Now, onto some of the main actors within this debate. First of all, let's look at the people donating. So we see the people donating are more economically stable in general. Why is this? Because we feel like economically stable people don't have their own issues, as many of their own issues to deal with, and have more wealth in general to help to feel like they can donate and fix these problems within society. For example, we'll give the example of James and Tom. Tom is someone who's underprivileged, is dealing with serious issues. They're not going to want, first of all, they're more likely to be impoverished and in poverty. They're not going to have the kind of money to donate resources. And secondly, they're mostly going to be dealing with fixing their own problems in society. Whereas James, a person who is more economically stable, will feel more willing to donate. Then we look at the people participating. These people are also more economically stable. And we see this because it would be pointless to have people dealing with issues to try emulate their own issues within events. So we see both of these groups are in general more economically stable, or at least more less disenfranchised within society. And let's look at the most vulnerable actor in this debate. And this is the second criteria that I think helps proposition or opposition win. Who protects the most vulnerable actor? And the most vulnerable actor is clearly the people receiving donations. These are the people that are dealing with actually the main issues within today's debate, and the ones who charities are trying to protect. Because they are the ones who experience the problems within today's debate, and because they are the ones who are experiencing the main issues, we see that they are the most vulnerable actors, and whichever side can prove that they are protected the most, as well as how charities succeed in proving their mandate, will be the team that wins this debate. Now to my main point, in which I prove fulfill the two criteria I've set and explain how the main actors I've identified play a role. So I've shown you how people are donating and people who are participating in these events are both more, in general, more economically stable and, or at the very least, less disenfranchised people within society. But why is this important? Because we see that we empathize, we identify with people who are like us. When I watch a movie or TV show, I in general understand someone's issue, especially if they are more like me, if they share certain identifying qualities about me, and especially if they identify the economic situation. If they have a similar economic situation with me. So we can see people who are donating will feel empathetic towards the participation. We also see that people participating are very readily shown dealing with the issues that the most vulnerable actors in this debate are dealing with. So what does this prove? Well, it means the people who are donating can identify more with the people participating, and the people participating are shown to deal with the biggest issues within today's debate. Therefore, we see the people who are donating are overall going to empathize with the issues and problems that the most vulnerable actors in this debate are dealing with. But why is this important? Well, therefore we see that when people who are donating understand the issues better and can empathize with those issues and can feel those issues more tangibly and can more realistically feel the issues that these people are dealing with, we feel like they are more likely to donate because they feel like their donations are actually going somewhere that they can actually realistically feel within themselves. So what do we prove? What is the actual tangible benefit of them donating to these charities? Well, firstly, we see these charities will help use this money to identify and to fix the problems that the most vulnerable actors in this debate deal with, showing my criteria number one. And second of all, it will help a charity to achieve their mandate to help fix these, to help deal with the most vulnerable actors in these debates issues. So what have I proved in this debate? I've identified two main criteria for why the teams will win. Firstly, identifying the mandate of charities, and secondly, showing that the people who prove that vulnerable actors are most protected in the debate is the team that wins. And I have shown how on our side we protect most vulnerable actors by encouraging people to donate through empathy, and also showing how through this empathy and through this donation, we also therefore protect the most vulnerable actors in the debate and allow charities to achieve their mandate. For these reasons, we have never been more proud to oppose.
So we have a side opposition that has argued for charity itself, a side opposition that has only provided side proposition with the criteria we need to fill in this debate. We have been giving little to none substantive matter, only how we win this debate and what to do and why we should win this debate. So we see that in this rebuttal, we're going to look at the problems of how they contextualize this debate and why a side proposition we are still winning this debate. So now we see that side opposition has said they value the most vulnerable actor, which are these people. The people that these people in positions of privilege will be emulating, the people they will be imitating. So they value them so much that they believe that it's okay to basically make fun of the situation that they're in to raise charity. This idea of charity that they've spoken about, of how they want to change it. We see that charity is not a one-time thing. That is simply a donation. A donation is giving money. Charity is actively making a cause and actively making a difference. And we don't see that this difference is achieved by camping out and sleeping on the field. We see that this is not truly emulating the type of situations that these people face. We also see that they say they value this idea of empathy, and they believe that empathy will be achieved through sleeping and emulating these conditions. And we see that that's completely true, because we see that what their first speaker said is that when he watches movies, he empathizes because he sees that people are similar. And we see that these people in these positions of privilege and the people that they'll be emulating, they're not similar. So we don't understand how that empathy will be achieved. So now that I've finished this rebuttal, I'd like to get on to my first point, which is this idea of distraction. We see that this distraction, basically emulating the conditions these people are in, it's a distraction. It's taking away from the real cause. And the real cause is we need to actively try and make a change in these people's lives. And we don't see that this is achieved by playing copycat, by seeing what they're doing and trying to act that out, because we see that it's not a true emulation. If we look at this idea of a CEO sleep out, these people are not sleeping on the corners of Johannesburg Street with cars bristling, with harsh weather conditions. They're simply laying on the field emulating these conditions. And we see that this is not a true reflection of what is happening. We see this rather as an event. It is a distraction. We see that the surface level of empathy that has been presented is not true. There is no empathy being provided. Rather, it's a game to be played. Oh, it's a challenge. It's a fun challenge. Let's see if I can survive 24 hours with no eating. It's a challenge, and it's a game to be played by these people in these positions of privilege. Really, if you wanted to see how hard it was, you go home, you go do it yourself. Just don't eat. Just don't eat for 24 hours. We don't see why you need to go out and do this, because it's becoming an event. You're going out, you're going with your friends, you're making it a fun party. Oh, it's a challenge. And we see that that is not the true form of charity. We see that side proposition, we'd rather educate. We want to make a difference. We don't want this one-time thing that we see that emulating these conditions achieves. So we see that this empathy is not reached, and we see that this is not a legitimate form of charity, because when you emulate these conditions, although you're in it for these 24 hours, it's not the same, and also you will go home. So this empathy won't be achieved, because you lived through it, but you never lived through all of it. And we don't think you can ever emulate a person's situations, because there are various things playing into this and changing what it is. So this person might be a woman. You cannot empathize the fear that this woman feels sleeping on the side of the road, but at fear, thinking that she may be rugged, that she may be molested. You cannot emulate that by sleeping on a field, going hungry for 24 hours, and we don't see that this is the truest form of charity. So we also look at how this is a misuse of privilege. We see that you're buying a ticket for an event. This is a fun event. You buy a ticket when you want to enjoy something and experience something. Going to Beyonce is experience something. Trying to emulate and imitate and make fun of the conditions that these people are facing, that is not an event. We would rather educate people and do different types of charity rather than trying to make fun and poke fun of them. We see that it's a misuse of privilege as a whole. The 24 hours that you spent not eating, this 24-hour fast, you know what you could be doing instead? You could be actively going to these communities, cooking for them, feeding for them, different things. We see that this is not true. You're not doing anything. Essentially, you're not doing anything at all. Are there any POIs?
Do you think you can ever get an actual form of representation when these people are actually part of different societal groups?
Okay, yes, okay. So we see this idea and we understand that is why we believe this emulation will never be achieved, because you will never reach this idea of empathy. We would rather have you try and make a difference, try and make an actual difference in people's lives, cook for them, help them, feed them, make a difference. Use the privilege that you have to make a difference rather than imitating these people and not changing anything at all. We see it's a duty community to community to do this. You are in a position of power, and you need to use that power correctly. We see that buying tickets to events is just to experience the struggle, experience something. It's not the true reflection of what these charities are trying to conceive, and that is why we believe a side proposition that this idea of going to an event to experience the struggle is not true, and it's not the truest form of empathy, and it's not the truest form of charity, because it's a one-time thing. This doesn't happen all the time. To do charity is to actively make an effort to make sure people's lives are changed, and in no way are you changing lives by doing this imitation. So we see that we've given you this idea of how we think that the idea of charity they presented isn't going to work in this debate, and that is why we don't think that emulating these ideas is beneficial in any way. So what we've done is we've adhered to the opposition side, to the criteria opposition has given us. They said we need to say why we think we best help the vulnerable actor. We best help the vulnerable actor because, one, we are educating people. We're telling people that this is not a joke. This is not something to poke fun of. You need to make a difference. You need to actively go out instead of making a fun event, something that you can make a challenge out of. Two, we see that we're helping these people because, one, now we've educated them. People will always try to do something because charity is not a one-time thing, and these events are a one-time thing. So we see the side opposition throughout their first debate, they haven't given us anything to work with, and that's why it was very difficult to try and make a case out of this, because what we've said is we don't value this imitation. We don't value it at all. We don't value it at all because you're poking fun at people, you're making a joke out of it, and you're not doing a charity. It's not charity. Rather educate people, fix people's lives, right? So we're fixing society's problems by educating people as a whole and not making a one-time thing. Because you see, you don't fix something by making fun of it. You don't fix something by making an experience. And as side proposition, what we're doing is we need to make sure that we understand that this empathy will never be achieved by going out and pretending like you're underprivileged, because in reality, you are privileged and you're making fun of someone's situation. So because of these reasons, we see that side proposition has adhered to the criteria that side opposition has given us, and therefore we win this debate.
Don't judge someone without walking a mile in their shoes, right? In this case, torn old shoes that well-off people are made to struggle through, right? And this has the biggest impact on people's situation, right? And I will get to this. But let's start off with some rebuttal, right? So, side proposition seems to think that now we are making these impoverished people's circumstances seem like a thrill, right? That we don't catch the gravity of their situation, right? We tell you that, first of all, they are very wrong. Because, firstly, as mentioned, people do come in with the idea of helping. They would not be doing this unless they actually wanted to make a difference in people's communities, right? And secondly, even if we were wrong, right, at the end of the day, we still feel that a spotlight is still being put on these charities. We still feel that this is the biggest way to help people, and I'm going to expand on this later on. They talked about discussion and we need to educate people and the benefit of having discourse. Well, we tell you that society does not become more charitable towards impoverished people because of discourse, as we've seen through status quo, as we've seen many times before. We tell you that there's been evidence of many different charities going through to help people. We tell you that not much of a difference has been made compared to what we're going to prove today. And it's a very weak mechanism in achieving your goal, right? You brought up this idea, but why don't privileged people open up feeding schemes and help feed people, right? And I quote from their speaker, charity is not a one-time thing. Exactly. We ask you, what benefit is it, one person doing a feeding scheme, or rather having thousands of people contributing and seeing the influence that this one person brings, hence enhancing your goal? Right? You spoke about how charities aren't going to opt into this, right? Well, firstly, we tell you charities are already opting into this because that's why these shows exist, that's why this motion exists. And secondly, the reason why they're opting into this is because it brings more of a spotlight and more attention, right? Then I don't think charities are really going to care. I think this brings what they want, this brings donations, this is what we need to help impoverished people, right? And then they spoke about an inaccurate representation. However, it was already POI'd, right? That we never have a fully accurate experience of another person's life. It's not practically possible being a human being, right? They cannot go through this. We tell you that there are two types of experiences, right? The actual tangible experience, that one we cannot actually go through because it's not possible. So we like to promote the second type of experience, right? An event that mirrors this experience to bring about the most empathy. It makes sense, and under your side, you are not really having the impact you think you are. So moving on to my point of representation, right? And this directly clashes with their speaker's point about distraction, right? So as we know, right, when someone is rich, they are valued in society because we live in a society that considers monetary gain as a way to buy influence, right? Rich people can buy news coverage, they can buy magazines and have their own talk shows and this and that, and they can draw attention to themselves, right? And without having to use extreme measures. So they naturally just have this influence, right? The second way that they have influence is also it can be inherited, right? You can come from a very influential family. We see these things occur. Now, let's look at disenfranchised people. It's a lot harder to draw attention to yourself because you cannot buy yourself this attention that rich people can and put yourself on platforms like social media. You cannot put yourself on platforms like TV and daytime TV, like newspapers and social media by yourself, right? Let's look at Kim Kardashian. If she was poor, she would not have the reach and following that she does. And if she did not have the inherited fame and fortune that she has from her family, she would not have the reach and the ability to promote herself, right? Now, disenfranchised people are only recognized in media, right? Because of one, their financial status when we're talking about that type of bracket of people, that social bracket of people. And the second thing is when they do these extreme things like protesting and stuff, right? Because the only way for attention to be drawn to them is because when they are forcibly halting the daily lives of more well-off people, right? For example, closing off the road to have a march, or like, for example, in service delivery to continue, for example, for service delivery to refuse to continue doing their work until they get these demands that they're working for, which in turn causes these more well-off people to become inconvenienced because this is the only method in which heads will turn, and this is the only method in which they will get the attention they deserve through these more well-off people who have influence. Now, let's look at these events, right? They generally consist of a more well-off person emulating and living through the experience of a disenfranchised and impoverished person, right? Now, what effects will this have when this extremely influential person is featured in the shoes of a not so influential person? We see that the rich person's influence enhances and promotes rather the experiences that of these disenfranchised people, which in otherwise would be overlooked, right, by most media. Media likes these catchy concepts and things that sell, right? And its nature of media is to be drawn towards the most influential thing. So as this is what sells the most, right? So by this richer person causing media to sell and causing media to be attracted to this, right? It therefore directly promotes these disenfranchised people's condition, because these well-off people have this influence that sells and promotes their current situation when they go through these shows, right? And in these events, they're temporarily impoverished situation, right? Now, why do we care about this? Because basically, right, this temporarily impoverished situation is getting the attention it deserves for the first time. It shows this influential person going through these awful struggles, right? And we feel that this itself is the best way to appeal to people. And as mentioned above about the individual influence, right? And because they already follow, because these influential people already have a following, they have a mass social media following, I'll take you in a minute, these mass informational following, people are going to be tracking and following their experience. Yes.
Okay, we value the attention that this charity might get, but do you value recreating the experience of these people as a joke?
We tell you that, first of all, it's not taken as a joke, because again, why would they be going through this? The reason is because they want to help people. That makes sense, right? And secondly, again, if it's bringing attention to what needs the most attention, which we both agree is disenfranchised people, and if it gets more people to donate, which I'm going to explain now, why not? So again, these influential people have a large following that are already tracking these people's experiences. They see what these well-off people are forced to go through, right? And therefore directly see what these impoverished people are forced to go through. This influential person's following is going to take notice of the experiences and realize what these people are forced to go through, right? It gives these people, these disenfranchised people, finally a platform to get recognition, to be heard, which in turn causes more people to be aware, spreads awareness, and therefore causes people to donate more, to look more. This, because we see through this influence carries it out, right? This is our goal, and this is your goal, to help these disenfranchised people in the largest way possible, right? So we see that for side opposition, right, we benefit people in the biggest way possible, in the most way possible, by advocating for these events to take place. And I have never been prouder to represent KZN. Thank you.
We
need to understand that we don't need emulation to have influential people come to the charity and support them. And I have identified two main strategic flaws with their case today. First of all, they fail to prove to us why they really benefit the most vulnerable actor they identified in the first speech, which is the people who are struggling in these countries. And they've only proved to us why the charities are going to be benefited and how the charities are going to be benefiting people. And second of all, the second strategic flaw is that they're failing to understand how discourse and empathy really works. So when a case fails to understand how the status quo and how a vital part of the motion really works, we believe that they can never win this debate. But furthermore, apart from that, I'm going to prove to you why side our proposition has won this debate based on two questions. First of all, will the people receive more support? And the first thing we get under from side opposition is that they want to protect the most vulnerable actors and create the most empathy. And second of all, they also told us under here how people do it to fix the issue, and they also understand that it's not making fun of them. So people go into it understanding that they're not trying to make fun of anything. And the last thing we got from this is that they're trying to create the maximum empathy, which they believe is beneficial. So now we see how my previous speakers have responded to this by saying how we believe that all this is that they're creating is just simply short-term, and they're not solving the long-term problems, such as like the financial things, because you may only receive some kind of like a short-term fund that might last them for like a month, but you're making no effort to make sure that like in the long term these people can be more benefited. So I have two new responses to this argument. First of all, why is empathy able to help them more? Because we see how we solve the long-term financial support and we also solve the problem through education, but however they gave us no analysis, nor did they prove it to us how their solution of empathy is going to make sure that for the rest of their lives that these people can have some kind of a substantial growth. And they haven't proved to us at all how this empathy that is going to be generated and how this empathy that they say is going to be maximized is able to make sure that these people are going to have money and like the famines are going to be stopped. My second response is that empathy doesn't solve problems, and nor does empathy educate people. And we also see how the empathy that is provided here, not only does it not do any of these things, furthermore, it is immoral and it's just simply false empathy, because we see how we don't value false discourse based on lies. Because you see how the false empathy that is created here is basically generated from things like the circumstances in which these emulations are happening are just not a very accurate representation of what is really going on. So now what did our case prove to you under this question instead? So we proved to you how people receive long-term support through education. And we gave you two core links here. We first of all told you how it's able to create discourse through more accurate representations. And second of all, we are going to have more long-term changes. So now I have a few more new links to prove under this to make our argument stand even more. First of all, how is long-term change specifically able to help these people? We see how people understand like the exact circumstances in which people are now living in, so which will mean that they'll be able to help in more like beneficial ways. For example, now they'll know that people in Syria who are at war, not only are they starving, but perhaps they don't have enough like clothes and things like that. So which is why we believe that people will be able to eventually help them with more resources and help them to the maximum extent. And then second of all, how is empathy better achieved on our side? We see how we'll be able to provide a more accurate representation, and we're going to be comparing emulation to a description of an actual experience here. So my first speaker came and she told you the entire thing about how we believe we'll have more accurate representation of the actual experience that is being experienced in those people that we're trying to help. So which is why we believe that the emulation is done in circumstances, like she said, where you're in your like own field, in your own area, and you aren't experiencing the emotions nor the stress that most of these people are really experiencing. And we would rather have someone who has experienced these things come and talk to you instead of false representation that is just simply not true and that is making fun of this entire situation. So let's do a quick weigh up of why we'll be winning under this question, because we see how, first of all, they give us no solution to how they're going to solve the problem that they've given us here. And second of all, we also see how they give us no analysis as to how empathy is actually going to make a change. And lastly, we also see how we have proven to you how not only are we going to make sure that these people aren't going to be like affected short term and are going to be harmed short term, we have also proven to you under here how they're going to be benefited in terms of long term effects. So let me move on to the second question, which I'll be validating my debate on, which is this morally correct? But before we move on to that, I'll be willing to take a POI.
Okay, ma'am, why do we see under your model that the effects of education are more influential than they are in status quo?
Well, because we see in status quo, like you said, in status quo, there are already events like these who are like trying to like emulate the experiences of these people. And we believe that that is just simply false education. And we do not value false education based on lies, because we believe the same principle that applies to us. We don't value false discourse that is based on lies. We don't value education that is not being achieved as it's not true and it's false and is based on representations that is not accurate of what people are actually going through. So I'm going to move on to my second question, which is this morally correct? The first idea that we get from their side is that it's able to help the struggling people more by more empathy, and they believe that it's morally correct to help someone. Second idea that we got there is how there's two types of experiences. The first one they gave us is the lived one, and the second one is the mirrored. And we got told that mirrored ones can't be 100% accurate. And we also see how there are celebrities who are helping these charities who are emulating these experiences, so they're gaining more traction and also more exposure. So now we have a previous speakers have responded to this argument by saying how the change achieved are a one-time thing, and people making a joke out of it, which is we believe is not morally correct. So I have 4 more new responses I'd like to add to this argument. So first of all, it's not true empathy, and we don't value not true empathy because the same way that we don't value discourse that is based on lies, then we don't value empathy that is based on false representation. And then second of all, we believe it's not moral when you went into the event with a mindset that this is just like some really fun and cool thing, and you're going to experience it with your friends, which is why we believe it's not moral to do so. And we believe it's also immoral to help charities who already have these celebrities and not help other ones who might be having more accurate representation, because right now what we get from their second speech is that all the focus is on celebrities who are helping these things, and they believe that this is beneficial as there's more exposure. But we believe that you don't need to have you don't need to have emulation in order to have influential people to come to your charity and support you. So what have we proved to you under here? We proved to you how there's going to be produced a stigma that these struggles are fun challenges, and we also believe it's incorrect for the privileged to misuse their power. So we already proved to you here on the 2 core links how the privileged are already misusing the power and degrading people, and also how these challenges are degrading the experience and struggles, which creates a bad stigma. So now I have 1 more link I'd like to add on to here, which is why is stigma detrimental now to the struggling, because you see how they're already in such harsh conditions, because we believe so it's immoral to further degrade their experiences and turn into some kind of a fun challenge like our entire case has been trying to prove to you. So if you side with the side that really caters for those struggling people long-term and short-term, you side with side proposition.
So I think my second speaker's point about how if you don't walk a mile in someone's shoes, you, 1, don't understand what they go through, and 2, you are then not able to help them in the best way that is beneficial to them, right? We still think that this stands in today's debate, which is why I'm so happy to oppose, right? In today's debate, we have identified several issues, right? What does like tangible empathy actually look like, and how do we achieve that, right? But also, what is like the best benefiting to these people, right? And like why education specifically should be prioritized in today's debate, and why that is any different from status quo, right? Like we also think, what is the influence of celebrities and why that is important for like what actually these people think are beneficial to them, right? So both sides have identified how the main actors in today's debate are the people who are disenfranchised, right? But what do these disenfranchised people actually want, right? Do they want emotional support groups where they overcome their emotional issues, or do they want tangible monetary value as to like, I'm not starving anymore, I need food on my table, right? We think that in order to overcome emotional situations, you first need to overcome physical ones, right? And we think that monetary value is the best way to do this, right? And so like this point still stands in today's debate because they haven't tangibly proved why education is any different in status quo, and why the monetary value in status quo is going to increase under their model while providing education, right? Which is why we believe we win on that point, right? So the whole point of education is like to educate people, right? But 1, we think like tangibly, what does empathy look like on our side, right? We think that it is impossible to get completely accurate representation when you yourself are not part of that group. So when we look at accurate representation, right, what is the best way for you to identify with that group? 1, we think that you aren't able to emotionally go through that struggle because you don't live that life, right? But what do we think is the next best solution to that? We think that status quo already educates you on that struggle, right? We think that life orientation already tells tells you why disempowerished people in Africa need help, right? But we think that education is already abundant and it's already available, right? So why is that education prioritized in today's debate? We think that after you're educated and after you're told on paper why empathy is an important thing, we think that tangibly you should be told why empathy is an important thing, right? I've already told you why you can't go through like emotional empathy of these people, but you can go through tangible empathy because you as a person are able to go through hunger, you as a person are able to go through physical suffering, right? So think that that is the best way that you achieve tangible empathy. We think that paper empathy is not something that is best beneficial to these people in a monetary value, right? We think that people, when they're able to best tangibly see what empathy looks like, they're more likely to buy into that idea that these people are suffering and they're best able to monetary benefit them. So when we see that the people in today's debate best value monetary money, we see that tangible empathy under our side is the best way that you help these people because that is what they see. I'll take you in a minute. What they see is best beneficial, right? So education is not a point that stands in itself, and like we've already proved to you what tangible empathy looks like and how this is beneficial, yes?
Well, then, do you believe that animal charities are an accurate representation of the struggles that these animals are going through?
Okay, so animal struggles and people struggles are different, right? We think that you as a person can't go through the struggles an animal goes through. We think that you as a person can't be poached by people from another country. We think that you as a person can't have your horn cut off by someone. We think that this example is irrelevant because people can go through struggles other people go through. You can't go through a struggle that an animal goes through. So that example is like not important, right? So we've already proved to you why education is different, right? We've also proved to you what benefit looks like, right? No, thank you. We see like what does celebrities and influential people that actually have monetary value look like in terms of benefiting these people? We think that these people bring along a following, right? And why do we value this following? Because we think that the people that are most influenced in today's debate value money more than they value you helping me with my emotional struggles, right? We think that me having a meal at the end of the day is more important than the fact that like I'm going through like emotional trauma and stuff, because we think that if you alleviate the fact that I don't have a meal and I'm at risk of like being caught out in the rain because I'm sleeping on the streets, we think that when you help that person by giving them these physical like things that they can tangibly have, right? We think that that helps you emotionally because one, you don't go through those physical struggles that lead to emotional trauma, right? So that is why these people best value being helped physically, right? So then why does this following actually benefit these people monetarily, right? We think that even if like these people, because I'll get to this and I'll flag you when I get there. We think even if these people think it's a joke and even if these people morally don't identify that, we think that they best help the main actors in today's debate because they give them monetary things. They give them things that look like you pay for a ticket to get in and that money goes directly to these people that are disenfranchised, right? We don't think that education you pay because you understand the empathy on paper, right? We don't see how education directly leads to like monetary gain, which is why we believe tangible empathy is something that this floor needs to actually consider, right? So what does a joke look like and why is like this important in today's debate, right? Their debate is based off of like the whole idea that this is made a joke, right? And we as a side want to prove to you what a joke actually looks like. We don't think a joke looks like you as a homeless person getting food at the end of the day. We don't think a joke looks like you as a homeless person actually having clothes to wear. We don't think a joke looks like you as a homeless person actually being able to be benefited by the struggle. We think that charity at the end of the day is aiming to benefit the people that are struggling, right? We think that a joke looks like these people are demeaned further. We think that a joke looks like these people are not helped. We think that a joke looks like these people are actually like worse disenfranchised. We think that that's what a joke looks like, right? We think that a joke in today's debate is not relevant because we think that this actually helps the people that are disenfranchised. It doesn't demean them further, right? Why then do we still think we've won today's debate? Because I've proved to you that a joke is not like relevant in today's debate because one, these people are actually benefited, right? And two, like we proved to you why tangible empathy is an actual reason why people give organizations money rather than what it looks like on paper. What we think that further than that, even if your education point was gaining money, we think that that still sensationalizes the issues people go through. We think that the background music in an advert that's going on TV still sensationalizes the struggle that person goes through. We think it still sensationalizes and demeans that struggle, even if that is what you're trying to prove, right? We think that that education is like not valuable in today's debate because it doesn't reach tangible like outcomes, right? So that is why I think we win today's debate, is because we're best able to practically help the people that are involved in today's debate. I've proved to you why their point on education doesn't stand. I've proved to you why tangible empathy is more important, and I've proved to you why a joke is still not relevant. So that's why I'm so proud to oppose.
The winner of this debate is the side that has proved the most tangible benefit to the vulnerable actors in this debate, and the side that has protected the most vulnerable actors in this debate the most. We see that proposition has completely failed to do this in this debate, and therefore we should win. As reply opposition, I will be identifying the major issues in this debate and explaining why we won on each one, and therefore how we protected the most vulnerable actors in this debate, and overall, therefore, why we won. So the first issue that I have identified is my major point, and one of our major points in our debate, which was empathy. So we've shown directly how people donating to these groups, to these charities, will be empathizing with the people participating in them, and therefore will feel more identified with the issues that we've identified that the most vulnerable actors in this debate deal with, and therefore they will donate more and deliver more financial benefits to the most vulnerable actors, therefore proving that we've protected the most vulnerable actors in this debate. Now, they have not really substantially rebutted this point, only claiming that empathy is not going to help the disenfranchised the most within this debate, and that is a surface level thing. So my third speaker has shown that the empathy that we're dealing with in this debate is tangible and real, and that we've provided a lot of substantial evidence, and that the rebuttal is not substantial on any level, and that also the financial benefits that this brings are real. They are tangible. They are not just these things that Prop has identified as meaningless within the debate. They actually allow people to eat food within this debate, and my third speaker has shown this. Now on to the second point, which is representation. So we've shown how people in powerful positions and celebrities, etc., will be participating in these events, and therefore will be bringing in a lot of traction to what they're showing within this debate. And they've failed to rebut this substantially on any level, which means this point still stands. We've also, and then the three next points are kind of the alternatives that proposition have tried to come up with this debate, and I will be showing why these are completely ridiculous. So first of all, we have education. So proposition has tried to show that charities should instead focus on education, etc. So I've shown in my rebuttal in my first speaker speech that this is not mutually exclusive to what we're covering within our debate, and that is, as I said, part of the status quo already. My third speaker has focused on how this is part of the status quo. We see this in schools, we see this in life orientation, etc., and so this does not bring any tangible benefit into the case or rebut our points. Another alternative that they brought into this case is discourse. They've said that charities should try to create actual discourse in this debate, and we've shown how often discourse does not bring tangible benefits, and how our points are much more realistic in this debate, and also how it is not mutually exclusive as an alternative. For a third issue, other alternatives. So they've claimed that a better event would be people helping soup kitchens, people like directly contributing to these communities. But we've shown that our main benefit for the long term benefits people long term. It's not just a one-time thing, which they literally identified within their debate. And therefore, and also this is, again, not mutually exclusive. Therefore, all their alternatives fall within this debate. Finally, we see the issue of ridicule. So they've come up here and told us that the points in this debate that we brought up will be ridiculing people within this debate. Therefore, we as opposition believe we have won.
When Alfie Days, a YouTuber with millions of subscribers, posted a YouTube challenge about being poor for a day in London, what we think he did, at the very end of his video, he said, firstly, it wasn't that hard. We think when someone with such influence, someone that you characterize in today's debate, demeans an issue, we think that this impacts these people directly. It gets rid of what they're actually facing. It gets rid of the circumstances that they face in real life. We think that they fail to engage with our matter, which I'll be talking about more in this reply. So we think that the most important thing in today's debate was who best helps most vulnerable actors in society and people that these charities are trying to help. So side opposition said that they best help these people through emulating their experience. We haven't really gotten any analysis to why emulation is the only means necessary. They haven't disproved why empathy is any less on our side. They haven't proved why empathy is just enough to create more change. We think they've already lost today's debate because they failed to fulfill their mandate that they've given themselves. We think in response we told you that empathy is already existent in status quo. We think that them trying to disprove our argument by saying, oh, that's in status quo already, is not doing anything because it doesn't actually disprove any of our arguments. Our arguments still stand. But we think that the problem isn't necessarily that no empathy exists. On our side, first, empathy still exists. I've told you this. People are still being affected by the issues. People still talk about them. But we think that empathy can also be created through education. We think that you admitted to this when you talk about how someone influential, like talking about an issue under your own best case, is educated by it, feels more empathetic. We think the very principle of your argument concedes to ours. We think that we give you examples of HIV/AIDS. We think more education has been brought around it. More people feel empathetic to those suffering from it. We think that, but this is accurate. But we think that if your empathy is based on things that aren't true, that aren't accurate, it's not real empathy because it literally does nothing. We give you examples of AfriForum and how they talk about white genocide and how this created empathy in America and Australia. We think this empathy isn't real because this empathy wasn't based on facts. We think that you can't feel empathetic towards something that isn't true. We think that this is not true in the debate. But on our side, what we actually do is we help those people through, firstly, creating more education around the issue. Education that actually helps those who are vulnerable. We think that we create more discourse because truthful discussions happen about these issues. We help deal with the actual causes behind these issues. And just because you give a starving person a piece of bread doesn't mean that you actually help them. We think that education still needs to exist to deal with the root cause of this issue. We think this is mutually exclusive because they don't create actual discourse that is true. They failed in this regard. We think that side opposition also failed to engage with any of our other harms that we've brought forward, such as firstly about distraction and how this distracts from the actual cause of the movement. We gave you example the ice bucket challenge, which I mentioned in my first speech, how it didn't become about ALS anymore. Instead it became about these rich celebrities doing the ice bucket challenge for fun. We think that secondly, they also didn't engage about the misuse of privilege, and instead of having rich people make challenges out of this, they should just donate if that's what you think they should do. We think side proposition has to win today's debate. Thank you.